So you mentioned a very interesting statistics. I think this traditionally in the past, they say IT projects always fail. And now digital products and services also still statistically very highly likely to fail. Like you mentioned, 70 to 90 plus percent. That is actually pretty high to me. So why do you think all these things happen? Technologies have improved a lot. People also have learned with so many people just pouring over knowledge on the blogs, webinars, and all that. Why still it's not solved? Why digital products still failing?
Well, there's a lot of common answers to that. I would say the most common answer that you would hear from people is that there's a lack of market fit. While that is, I think, a huge issue, and I don't want to make it any smaller than it is because it is substantial. Honestly, I think it's because a lot of companies skip the fundamentals. What they're doing is that they're looking for shortcuts and quick wins. They're emphasizing the approach from their vantage point. If you're a product leader and you have an engineering background, you're going to come at it from an engineering point of view. And if you're a great product manager who's maybe a great business analyst, you're going to come from it from an analyst perspective. And so there's nothing wrong with that. But the challenge is when you become that product owner or that product manager, you need to now have the responsibility to bring a holistic point of view to how that product is created around solving whatever the problem is that product helps fulfill. And the fundamentals of that get missed a lot. They get missed in business. And then what happens is when those things get missed, instead of having empowered product teams that are really there to solve problems, what you end up having is teams that are fulfilling requirements, working towards hope instead of outcomes. Some might take that harsh, but it's completely true. The work becomes ungrounded to foundational principles that are essential to allow your team to solve problems effectively and making sure those problems are being solved in a way that align with the market, align with the organization's resources and capabilities, and having the team work at its best possible level of performance to achieve the outcome that's been set forth. And so I think that there's a fundamental aspect there that is really holding many companies back.
And I also found one of the quote in the book. It mentioned that organizational leaders are lured by the promise of innovations and technology without understanding the fundamental requirements that guide initiatives to the finish line. I mean, yes, there are plenty of technology breakthroughs, innovations. Maybe we can call out like blockchain or maybe AI, cloud. Do you think that all these new innovations also, in a sense, play a part into the failure of all these digital products?
They do, absolutely, but it's actually not the technology's fault. Let me expand on that. So there's something called Armours Law. The idea of this is that people's expectations of technology are too high in the beginning when a new technology is introduced. So let's use artificial intelligence as the example. When AI was first introduced, it was introduced back in the 80s. I can remember it being a major thing. It became another theme in the late 90s. And here it's a major thing again. Our expectations of what artificial intelligence is capable of doing and can do has been ahead of the technology itself for decades. Very shortly, our expectations will be behind the actual capabilities of that technology. But it's taken 30 plus years for that to actually be true. And this is really something that is an incredibly common thing. So you see a new technology get introduced, our expectations and the excitement and the buzz around it is incredibly high. It doesn't meet those expectations. People abandon that technology or move away from it to either what they knew that would work before or the next thing. Those that are in the technology that build these incredible innovations of technologies, they're proving, they're learning, they're in this continuous learning cycle, and then eventually they get there. And so this promise and these expectations gap is really a huge thing that has to be managed correctly. When you take a leader in an organization, they wouldn't be the leader of that organization if they weren't really good at their job, very smart individual, able to make good decisions with very little information. It's challenging if they can't manage that expectation of that technology. And that isn't something that's talked about. It's not something that is at the forefront of our conversations when we talk about innovation and new technologies. And that's not how technology is sold. Why would I sell you a promise that's going to fall flat? So there's this disconnect that happens very early on in new technologies. Those technologies have to evolve in order to meet expectations. And leaders have to be able to diagnose What phase is that technology in? And what is its propensity to actually drive change effectively at a lower cost than transitioning from the way that we do business today?
And I think one of the fundamental, maybe requirements, so to speak, or skill set that you want to emphasize on the book is actually called alignment. I think many people would have understood about the term alignment, but maybe in your view, as the author of this book, can you help to describe what do you think is alignment and why is it so critical for people or teams to actually have this alignment for the success of their either digital products or services?
Sure. So I think alignment is one of the most commonly assumed things from many people and is probably in many cases one of the least understood. So when we talk about alignment in the context of what we're talking about today and in creating products and services, there's 4 levels of alignment we have to consider. And I'll go from the inside out. So the inside out approach to that, we start with the individual. How does an individual know how their work contributes to success of the product? How does that impact its customer, its users in that product? How do they know that their work matters? That's an incredible point of alignment that individuals need to have to be passionate, to be curious, and to know that they can make an impact through the work that they do. So whether you're a designer, an engineer, or a product manager, or you're overseeing entire teams, that individual alignment and understanding how your work matters becomes foundational. And we know engaged teams and people are far more effective at solving problems. The second piece to that is team alignment. Is everybody on the team understand their roles, responsibilities? Are they accountable? Do they know how cumulatively they can come together to solve problems and to do great things? And so that's really important. And then the third one is organizational alignment. Is the organization aligned its resources, expectations, built teams, empowered individuals to effectively achieve the things that the company exists to do? If those things aren't happening, it can be very difficult to align with the market, which is where we find market fit and essentially aligning with our customers or our users' needs. Being able to have enough awareness of what's the actual cost and impact of the problem that we're solving. What's this new idea? How are we solving it better or differently than someone else? How does that create distinct competitive advantage or business model opportunity or an advantage that is hard to replicate? This idea of alignment at all 4 levels is essential. And in the top performing organizations from our research and work over years, you find consistently that leaders from the top are working towards alignment at all times, at every level. And it's not a one-time exercise. It's a discipline of incredibly high impact leaders to be working on that focus of alignment at all 4 levels.
Thanks for sharing all these 4 levels. So just to recap, there are 4 different levels. You mentioned individual, teams, organization, and market. I think it's really interesting insights, definitely. Like what you mentioned, we all assume we are all aligned, maybe some speech or maybe some message over the time, you keep repeating yourself, but actually it's less understood. Not necessarily people gets to align to the core.